A note to listeners, the following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences.
After I had obtained the police discovery from Bittaker, I had found, all the guys from the county jail. And I came across Anthony's name, Anthony Conjeo, and he was one of the guys from Los Angeles County who testified at the trial and had information about other murders that Bittaker was not prosecuted for, such as the Knott's Berry Farm murder.
An inmate at the California Institution for Men, Chino, California.
Anyway, he went to an interview one day and he came back outraged that his crime partner was pinning these murder on him, and he was just in a ranting mood. And anyway, he started blurring out some specific details that were kind of like, you kind of get your attention. And the comment was that his crime partner had indicated that they had kidnapped and murdered a young girl. Every minute I was on that stand, I was making direct eye contact with him.
What was that like?
I was expressing with my eyes that we know what you did, and you told me what you did. And the kind of like, when your mom or your dad catches you in the cookie jar, you got that, lights in the headlights in the eyes kind of look. You got me. And he said that was the look on his face. I can still remember it. It was like, damn, it was true. What I was testified to, and he knew it.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman.
In the 10 years of Laura Brand's research, she has discovered mountains of information on serial killer cases that reveal additional victims, witnesses, and evidence of where missing remains could be found.
3 years ago, Laura stumbled on someone who Lawrence Bittaker shared details of his brutal murders to while incarcerated in LA County Jail after his arrest. In the late 70s, Anthony Conjeo was a 26-year-old who was housed with Bittaker in LA County Jail for bank robbery and murder.
The information that Anthony told Laura not only solidified what she already knew about Bittaker, but she also learned of some new murders that Bittaker and Norris committed that have not even been looked at.
Today, we're going to take you inside a California state prison where Anthony is still serving time for his crimes to hear what Bittaker told him and how Anthony eventually testified against the Toolbox Killer in an effort to do something good for his past crimes.
This is Global Tel Link. You have a prepaid call from
Anthony Conjeo.
an inmate at the California Institution for Men, Chino, California.
Hey, Anthony.
Yeah, I'm back, Laura.
Hey, I have Cindy and Rob on.
Hi, Anthony.
Nice to meet you, Anthony.
Let me introduce myself. My name is Anthony Conjeo, and I'm glad to meet you. I heard your podcast. I like the way you speak.
Appreciate it.
He listened to the Alan Pass episode and the Kristen episode.
Okay, great. All right. Well, Anthony, what we're going to do is Laura's going to introduce you. She's going to tell a little bit about how she met you and as far as what you guys were working on together, and then we'll ask some questions, okay?
Okay, I got you.
Fantastic.
Great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Laura.
So I guess I'll start from the beginning.
Yeah, just...
Yeah, Laura, start from why you got in touch with him in the first place.
After I had obtained the police discovery from Bittaker, I had found, all the guys from the county jail. And I came across Anthony's name, Anthony Conjeo, and he was one of the guys from Los Angeles County who testified at the trial and had information about other murders that Bittaker was not prosecuted for, such as the Knott's Berry Farm murder. It took a couple years to even track Anthony down. I called every single Anthony Conjeo in the state of California, and there was hundreds just in Los Angeles County. And then I finally found him in Chino.
Just be a little bit more clear, just for people that don't know, why was it important for you to get in touch with Anthony?
It was important because he had information on the unknown murders that Bittaker was never tried for, such as like the Knott's Berry Farm murder that we have information about.
Mm-hmm. And which other ones?
There's a girl named Gretchen who's never been seen again. Don't have a last name, but there was mentions of Gretchen in the discovery, as well as a New Year's Eve murder that Bittaker committed solely by himself.
And how long have you been talking to Anthony?
I think it's about 2 years now or more. I think I tracked Anthony down. It was right when COVID hit in 2020.
Got it. All right. Well, that's good. That brings us up to speed.
Yeah, I think it's going on 3 years now, Laura.
Yeah, I think it's about 3 years.
So, Anthony, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, obviously, you're behind bars right now, but I understand that it looks like you might be up for parole and getting out soon. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I come from a pretty good family. My mom and dad were married at 14 and 17, and they had 4 kids, and they did very well for us.
If you can kind of expand about your background and what led you to prison.
In 1979, I was arrested for bank robbery, and that's how I came in contact and met Larry Bittaker. I'm a product of the 70s. I played sports all through high school. I was an average student. There was a social revolution going on at that time, Vietnam, free love, then drugs started entering the picture, which was a big factor, I think, in Bittaker's background also. And I gave into it, and I became a victim of it. And anyway, I found myself in the county jail after committing a bank robbery, and that's where I came in contact with Lawrence Bittaker. And to be honest with you, it's kind of a long story to kind of articulate in this short of time, but it was out of the ordinary when I did meet him. He was an average-looking guy. He had maybe an oversized big head. Anyway, he went to an interview one day, and he came back outraged that his crime partner was pinning these murder on him, and he was just in a ranting mood. And in the county jail, it was so crowded and so many things going on in there. You kind of whatever, this guy's, he's traumatized over something. Anyway, he started blurring out some specific details that were kind of like, you kind of get your attention. And the comment was that his crime partner had indicated that they had kidnapped and murdered a young girl. And the comment was what he was claiming that his crime partner was making against him was that he put the coat hanger around her neck. And then when he said that, it was kind of like drop dead silence with, I think it was Bill Shinley, and he made this comment, and he was like, what the, this, and he was just kept ranting that his crime partner was putting these crimes on him, and he kept referring to the coat hanger, and I'm not sure if it was vice grips or pliers that he said were used to strangle this first victim. I'm not even sure if it was the first victim or not.
So what went through your mind when you heard this and that he was revealing this information to you?
Rob, you hear so many stories in the county jail, you don't know if it's fabricated or if this guy's coming down off some kind of drugs. You kind of in shock when you hear something like that. Then as time went on, more and more issues started coming to light. He walked up on a poker game one day, I think in the middle of the day room, and he wanted to talk, I think it was to me and Shinley, that he was concerned that how could they convict him on the word of his co-defendant if there was no other, facts or proof. And as of yet, this is after the fact, they hadn't discovered the tapes or the recordings yet, and he was kind of asking for kind of like, just a general question. Could they prosecute him on this word of mouth of his co-defendant?
So he was just spitballing with you guys to see counsel from you to see whether or not what they had they can actually prosecute him for.
Yeah, that was like in the first 2 or 3 days after the first interview. And can I elaborate?
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. As more and more he was called out for interviews, I guess the cops were playing good cop, bad cop on him and insinuating that, we have more facts. Your crime partner is pinning everything on you. So when he would come back from these interviews, Rob, the level of agitation was like at a 10. And he kept blurting out these facts that, we may have done this, we may have done that. And he was referring to the kidnappings, and none of this came out as far as the torture or anything later. We found out later, but he was coming back agitated and blurting out more about facts. And he mentioned a girl in a uniform or maybe who knows what kind of uniform. It was just a uniform that by Knoxbury Farm they had. I'm trying to recall if it was him.
I actually, Anthony, I have the discovery where this part is at. Do you want me to read the statement on the discovery?
Yeah, go ahead.
Anthony stated there was an alleged girl who had been killed in the vicinity of Knoxbury Farm, had some type of uniform on. He stated that he didn't know whether it was a nurse's uniform or a waitress's uniform, or just exactly what kind. He then stated that Norris had beaten the girl to death after Bittaker had intercourse with her. Norris got into the rear of the van and had intercourse with her after she was dead.
And that's what
that sounds familiar.
That's what Bittaker said to you?
You know, Robin, I think that's the first time I heard the word. It was after necrophilia. It was called necrophiliac, where it was after the fact that she was dead that this happened.
There's actually multiple reports from other inmates that talk about this incident at Knott's Berry Farm where Bittaker said there was actually a third party with them at Knott's Berry Farm, and Bittaker and the third party were laughing, telling Norris she's dead and you're still having sex with her and laughing.
And this victim has never been found.
No, she's never been found.
And you don't know her name.
No, I've been
No, I
searching.
don't.
It's terrible.
Well, to be honest with you, Rob, it was kind of like the police. We when I was interviewed, when it came to light that Bittaker had been talking to me, and I was interviewed by one of the detectives, I explained the story. I repeated the story to them, and they said, "We'll look into it." And in the next interview or so on, after a few days, I'd either call them or they had come down, and I asked them, "Was there any facts or validity to this woman from Knott's Berry Farm?" And the answer was, "I don't want to say something that's not true or accurate." It was like we took notes on what you said. We haven't been able to find a missing person or a report from Knott's Berry Farm. So it kind of just fell by the wayside.
And I just want to read all three of you something from the police discovery. This is from the report when Joe Jackson went to authorities about Bittaker and Norris. And this is from Paul Bynum, the lead detective on the case. This is from his notes on that meeting with Jackson that day. He met with him.
And who is Jackson again? Remind people who Jackson is.
Joe Jackson is the one who turned Bittaker and Norris in. He had met Norris way back when they were in a Tuscadero. He's also a serial rapist like Norris. And they also were all housed in D Block in CMC East. And they all got out around the same time, moved to Los Angeles. But this was from Paul's notes. Paul pretty much asked Jackson, why is he coming forward and telling him all this stuff? And the first thing that Jackson told Paul was there was 6 murders. And he said, when I go talk to Bittaker and Norris, what are they going to tell me about you? And Jackson states, they're going to tell you I was involved in a Knott's Berry Farm murder, but it's bullshit. And then the interview ends.
Interesting.
Do you think he was?
I don't know. I mean, all the reports from Los Angeles County say there was a third person there. Anthony, you could speak more to that. Do you remember Bittaker talking about a third person?
I do vaguely, and they just never pursued it as far as being an actual case or having evidence to pursue it. But Bittaker had mentioned there was a victim from the Knott's Berry Farm. The uniform issue was repeated.
No call back.
Oh, did he get cut off?
Yeah.
What are they, 15-minute calls?
Yeah, 15, I know.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting for him to call us back, what are some of the other things that we want to ask Anthony that he would be privy to?
New Year's Eve murder.
Okay.
There's a lot of mentions of I actually did find a missing person of a girl who went missing on New Year's Eve in downtown LA.
Okay. And then also about what he knew about what you were telling us earlier about the van and how...
the van and taking the hit out on Jan, too. Mm-hmm. Oh, and hearing the Ledford tape.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so why was he able to hear the tape?
He was just talking to Kay before trial. Tape was out, and Anthony hit play or something and heard. He can tell you the whole story.
Yeah,
but
we'll
Kay
hear
was
from
like,
him.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. How long does it usually take him to call back?
Pretty quick.
Okay, good.
Really quick. Yeah, I have the excerpts from the discovery out, too.
Okay, good.
This is Global Tellink. You have a prepaid call from
Anthony Conjeo.
an inmate at the California Institution for Men, Chino, California. To accept this call, say or dial 5 now.
Okay, I'm back, Laura.
Okay. So let's pick up where we were left off. So eventually you testified against Bittaker, correct?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that and what that was like.
I've been sharing some things with Laura. You gotta, it's understandable. I was in custody on a serious charge, and when this happened, some of the people that were involved were looking for a payday, were looking for some kind of reward for their testimony and their cooperation. I was explaining to Laura about maybe a week after my arrest or in encountering Bittaker, my daughter was almost kidnapped and pulled into a car, almost the same scenario to these other girls. And my motivation did a 180. I have to admit that I was looking for a deal. I was looking for some kind of leniency. But as things, more and more facts and issues came to light, the gruesomeness, everything went out the window. My motivation was to do the right thing. I was 26 years old when this thing transpired, and it didn't really hit me until I was called. It hit me, but the severity didn't take impact until I went to the courthouse. I think it was one of the interviews before the trial of the prelim, where there was a tape recording on the desk, and the Steve K and the other prosecutor, Ramsey Randolph, who since passed away, were discussing strategies and questions for me on the stand. And I turned on this tape recorder.
And what was on the tape recorder?
I can't even.
Anthony, what was on the tape recorder?
Hang on a minute. I can't even describe. I don't know how you describe horror verbally, but I heard the screams, and it's really, I'm kind of stuck for words how to explain, to describe what was. Well, it was a tape recording from the van of where they had bound and was torturing, and I forgot her name. I don't know if it was Schaefer or Lynette.
It was Lynette.
And they were, and the sounds coming from this poor girl.
It was disturbing to you.
It was beyond disturbing, Rob. I mean, I can't even. I really can't. It was beyond disturbing. Anyway, when I turned it on, they took the people in the room turned. The prosecutors, Steve K, said you can't be playing with that. That's evidence, and you're not supposed to be hearing that or whatever. But I heard it, and it'll stay with me for the rest of my life. But anyway, when I did testify, and I kind of made some, I don't know if you read my testimony, when I was asked why I had come forward, and I explained my motivation about having a daughter and being maybe in a situation where this had happened, I felt motivated beyond any kind of leniency or monetary gain. And I made it was kind of being 26 years old, it was a smart-ass comment. They asked me, how did you feel being around Bittaker when he was discussing these things? I made the comment, he's lucky I didn't beat his ass, and that was a true statement. That was a true statement, and it was 26 years old, chip on my shoulder, and I thought I was invincible. So anyway, that's...
Yeah, he also stated in your testimony, you said, when they said, why'd you come forward? You said, it's like asking, why is the sky blue? He was torturing these babies.
That's more accurate, Rock.
Okay. All right. So when you knew you were going to be testifying against him, were you still talking to Bittaker?
No, he had been moved. He had been moved to a secure housing unit. It was kind of like what they call celebrity role. There was high-profile Mexican mafia members down there, high-profile serial killers down there. He was removed from the housing unit that we were in.
Were you in CJ?
Yes, county jail.
Yeah. So you were in the main one, the main CJ downtown.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I know the housing unit they put him in.
Okay, so when you testified against Bittaker, was it only for what he said about Lynette, or was there other murders that he discussed with you? Laura had mentioned something about the New Year's Eve murders.
The main one was where there was the first one where the body was discovered in the ivy. He had talked about them having the tapes of the torture of Lynette. And the second scenario, it was the Knox Berry Farm murder that they never pursued or followed up on.
The reports on the Knox Berry Farm from the jail are that they placed her in a dumpster.
That's true.
Did they ever find... They put her in a dumpster, so what happened to the body then?
It's probably in a landfill.
They never found it?
Yeah, never discovered.
They don't know. It was never discovered. But, I'm going to be honest with all three of you guys there. For them to be just 5 victims, I'm sure there's more out there that have never been discovered, and I don't know of Bittaker shared this with Laura on his deathbed at San Quentin, but I would be almost positive there was other victims out there, and this didn't start as a whim. This was planned at CMC between Roy Norris and Lawrence Bittaker. They had found a way to undo the harms or the dysfunctional childhoods they experienced as kids, and they perpetrated this on the most vulnerable people in society, and that was young girls. Yeah,
but when you were talking to them originally, when you were talking to Bittaker, he was trying to push it off up back onto Norris. He's saying Norris is he's flipping on me and trying to push it on me, but it was Norris. So was that
exactly?
Was that accurate?
Yeah. When he came back,
he wasn't copying to the murder. He was blaming it on Norris.
No, he was claiming I was just there, which is kind of silly. When he came back, like I said from the first interview, he was irate that his crime partner was claiming that, and he used the word murders. He didn't use the word singular. He used the word murders, and I still remember that because it kind of rung a bell, just a chord that he came back and he used the word that his crime partners is putting these murders on him, and that's where the comment came that he only put the clothes hanger around her neck. And Norris, again, I don't know if it was the vice grips or pliers. The comment or pliers or vice grips.
And then Laura was also telling us about how he was trying to get people to destroy the van. Did you know anything about that or hear anything about that while he was in prison, jail?
No, I don't.
Laura, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, he was going to certain guys in the prison trying to pay them to blow up the van. This is before the Lynette tape was discovered, because he knew it was in the tape cassette player, and the van had been transported from Burbank to the Hermosa impounding lot, and he was trying to get it blown up there before they discovered the tape. He also tried to pay, I think it was $10,000, and he was offering to have Jan Mallon, a survivor, killed because she was going to testify. She was a 29-year-old flight attendant coming home from work, and they attacked her right outside her home and tried to drag her in the van and sprayed her with chemicals. Thankfully, her screams woke up her neighbors and people came outside and she wasn't taken.
And how did you find this out? Who revealed this information to you as far as the van being blown up and all that?
Oh, it's just stated numerous times in the discovery from the, people from the jail coming forward saying he's trying to get a hit taken out, the van blown up. And I have a copy of the kites. So a kite in prison is like a secret message. I have Bittaker's kites that he was sending out to the guys in county jail that state trying to find Jan Mallon's address and getting the van blown up.
So, Anthony, when stuff like that happens, I don't know if you experienced any of it, obviously with just your experience as being an inmate for a long period of time inside county jail, inside a prison. Does that happen a lot where if someone's coming in and these kites are going around to try to get someone erased so they don't testify against them, or things happening? How often does that happen?
It's very common, especially if you're talking about people with means and cartel type people, organized crime people. It's a common practice. It really is. For the most part, they're not successful, but the few that are, it takes a while. You have to have somebody coming forward. And had not the people in this case with Bittaker come forward, I think they were the linchpin for like Laura. The things that Laura's doing right now, discovering facts, discovering maybe potential sites of other bodies. Had people not come forward, these things would have never been discovered.
And I also want to just add, too, these threats, though, that Bittaker was trying to get the van and Jan Mallon erased, it was pretty serious because he started going outside of like the informant type circle to other people within the county. And it was Paul Bynum actually showed up at Jan Mallon's house in the middle of the night, and he had to get her to a safe house. They were really scared that she was going to be taken out. And then it was Stephen Kay who put, you know him well, Anthony, Dennis Curran as a security detail from the sheriff's department on Jan. They had to have her.
I remember that.
Yeah, and they ended up getting married, actually.
Wow, yeah. That's crazy. It's crazy. So
Mm-hmm.
he was basically...
Rob, it's kind of... When you got the severity of something like this hanging over your head, people in prison go to extremes, especially people who have the financial wherewithal to do this. I'll give you an example. This Jeffrey, he was killed in prison behind other people, angry at what he had done, the cannibalism, and just it's a common practice in here.
All right. Well, when you dial back in, because it looks like we're going to get cut off soon, I want to delve into that a little bit more about what happens behind bars. And
okay, I'm going to call right back.
Okay.
Rob, I'm going to call right back.
Okay, great. Thanks. For most of our listeners, when you're talking to an inmate behind bars on phone calls, they only get like 15-minute, 20-minute blocks. So they have a certain amount of time they can call and talk. So Laura, some of the other things that we can talk to Anthony about, what do you think that's salient at this point?
I definitely want to touch on the New Year's Eve murder and Gretchen. Gretchen is a big piece to the puzzle, too.
It doesn't seem like he knows a lot about the New Year's Eve
I know.
murder.
I asked him. He said he didn't know.
He might not. I do want to cover Gretchen. He was one of the big ones who came forward on the Knott's Berry.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Conjeo.
An inmate at the California Institution for Men, Chino, California.
All right. So, Anthony, you're back. So one of the things I wanted to ask you is that when you knew who Lawrence Bittaker was when he came in and you knew what he was charged with, what were some of the other inmates, how do other inmates treat people like that when they, like you said, you were alluding to the fact of the Jeffrey Dahmer that, he got killed in prison because of the horrendous things he did to his victims. How were guys like Bittaker treated in like a jail situation?
He's lumped in the category of a child molester, because a child molester in prison is the most heinous of crimes because they take the most vulnerable and innocent people and do these horrible things to them. And they're really, you might have some people who might not idolize them, but think it was no big deal. But for the most part, they're despised, and they normally end up in protective custody away from the general population because of the nature of their crime. But on death row, it's a little bit different story because the nature of the people housed up there are under that same umbrella of committing heinous brutality acts against innocent people. And I'm not saying it's the norm, but probably being he was housed at, I'm surprised nobody did harm him or try to kill him. It's really surprising.
After you heard the tape of Lynette Ledford, which is by far one of the most horrific things and has destroyed people's lives after they've heard it because it's so horrific, did you see Bittaker again after that?
No, the only time I saw him was in court after that. You know, something kind of strange happened. I don't know if it was documented anywhere, but after Bittaker started talking to me and Bill Shinley, there was a sheriff's deputy who did he did a lot of damage because when we were talking to Bittaker, this sheriff deputy called Bittaker up to hit the area where the officer was and told Bittaker, hey, you need to be careful. These guys are milking you or pumping you for information. And Bittaker came up to the day room, where it's called the day room, where the TV's at and people play cards and whatnot. And he said, hey, this cop just said you guys are trying to get information out of me. And we just kind of had to laugh it off. When we were in the TV room, I can't remember if they had found a body, but it was on the news while we were in the day room and talking to him. It mentioned the arrest of Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, and they were saying it was comments about possible more victims to be discovered. And he goes, and he reacted to that. And I don't want to say something that's not true, but he responded to it, and I can't remember what his response was.
I just found this in the discovery. I had actually forgotten about this one, and there's multiple accounts of this other murder as well. And it says Anthony stated that Bittaker told you he found trash bags just like the one where he wrapped a body of a woman and reportedly threw her off the cliffs of Palos Verdes into the water. And the reports are that he stabbed the body all over so the sharks would come and eat the body.
And then who is this presumed victim?
There's no name mentioned, just Palos Verdes is the only reference to her.
And that was in the discovery?
Yeah.
Is that an instant?
Remember him talking about the body he threw off of TV?
No, I don't. This was 43 years ago.
Yeah, no, I understand. Let's talk about when you testified against him, and that's when pretty much the last time you saw Bittaker. What was that like, and was he looking at you? How was he reacting to your testimony?
I felt empowered. I felt some redemption for my past aggressions or past acts were being nullified. I felt empowered. I felt I was doing something honorable. I had no problems. They wanted to label me an informant of whatever they wanted to call it. I felt I was doing what a normal citizen who had some norms and morals about him that would do, and I felt good about it.
And then, did you make eye contact with him at all during the trial?
Believe it or not, every minute I was on that stand, I was making direct eye contact with him.
What was that like?
I was expressing with my eyes that we know what you did, and you told me what you did, and the kind of like, when your mom or your dad catches you in the cookie jar, you got that, lights in the headlights in the eyes kind of look, you got me, and he said that's was the look on his face. I can still remember it. It was like, damn, it was true what I was testifying to, and he knew it.
Yeah, so he knew he was done at that point.
He knew what he had told me was true, exactly.
Did he ever contact you afterwards?
No.
So that day at the trial was the last time you saw or heard from him, correct?
Yeah.
Laura, what can we add here?
Well, I don't know if this will jog your memory, Anthony. This was a victim Bittaker actually spoke to me about, and Jason, who was the PI on his case, who we spoke with, he remembers her too. There's a lot of mentions of this girl, Gretchen, and she was a young blonde. Bittaker met her at a gas station and wrote down her license plate and tried to follow her around. And at the time, Norris had a friend who was working for the police police, and Bittaker called her and said, "Can you run this plate for me? I accidentally hit her and I drove away and I feel so bad and I'm on parole and I just want to send her the money." So she ran the plate and it came back, her address came back to the Church of Scientology. And that's when him and Norris started going to the Church of Scientology, and they found her. And they even went inside and tried to even join the church. And they tried to tap the phone lines of the Church of Scientology to find out her address and more information about her. They hunted this girl very hard. All I have is a first name, Gretchen. And I know she was blonde, blue-eyed, young, was part of the Church of Scientology, but there's no last name mentioned about her. I've tried to contact the church just to see if they had a girl named Gretchen around that time. It says she was a teacher there, a teacher of ethics, but I cannot find her last name, and I don't know if she's alive or not. Do you remember anything about Gretchen or him mentioning a Gretchen to you? Scientology?
Again, to be honest with you, Laura, no, I've never heard about that.
Found out about her. He was going to look into her, but Garber, Bittaker's defense attorney, told him not to.
Who was going to look into it?
PI, Jason, who was hired on for the, defense for Bittaker. Garber, his attorney, told Jason not to look into Gretchen.
Because it'd be another victim.
Correct.
So, Anthony, so you stated earlier that you're pretty much convinced that there are a lot of many more victims of Bittaker and Norris. What makes you believe that?
Knowing the psychology of people like that, they don't start out with 1, 2, or 3. It's probably been going on for a while. I would just say that there is more, and I don't know why they haven't been investigated. And it's really hard because it's like, again, looking for a needle in a haystack. Where do you look? There's so many.
Yeah. The reports in the discovery from other inmates came forward and said that Bittaker said the number 29 total.
29. So he was in there bragging about it.
Yeah, he even signed a couple playing cards with different phrases. One was Norris did it. One said hitchhikers welcome. One said death always. He was bragging. He named the van. He was talking about Murder Mac, how they named it Murder Mac. He wasn't quiet.
Is that common inside there, Anthony? They like to brag about their crimes?
Okay, say it again.
I was going to say, is it common for people to come in the county jail or in prison, when they get in there, they start bragging about their crimes?
Yeah, they kind of, when they feel secure, they get into an area where they'll find somebody, that they hang out with, and they'll start confiding and kind of boasting. Yes, it's kind of morbid, it's kind of the mentality of where I live and where I'm at.
Yeah. And how long have you been locked up now?
Going on 38 years.
And that was for bank robbery?
And a murder.
I also wanted to ask you, Anthony, do you remember Bittaker ever mentioning anything about a Crystal Lake?
No. The only mountains, not lake, but I remember San Dimas.
I think when we do a search for Cindy and Andrea up on those roads, I think it's going to be a body farm up there.
So you believe that was a dumping ground?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
There's so many crevices, and there's no doubt there's areas up there that people have.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
We're going to have to shut this off because they're going to end up killing the link here.
No problem.
And
all right, well,
cut off in the middle.
No problem. Well, Anthony, thank you for your time. If we need anything else from you, we'll call you back at another time.
I hope at some point in time we can do more, and I need to jog my memory on some of these things that are important to you and Laura. It'll give me time to think about it, so you guys, you and Cindy can come up with some more questions, and I'd be more than willing to help.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Laura. I'm sorry, Laura. I didn't mean to leave you out.
Yeah.
No, thank you for all your help.
All righty. Well, thank you, Anthony.
No problem.
All right. So, Laura, why don't you stay on
right.
once he jumps off, and then we'll talk a little bit more. So,
God bless you all.
You too. Thank you.
You too.
Anthony.
Stay safe in there.
Thank you.
All right. So, interesting, Laura. It's interesting that how Bittaker, as soon as he was put in county jail, he immediately, his ego took over, and he felt like he needed to stake a claim on some of it. He was blaming Norris for it, but at the same point, he was kind of attaching himself to those brutal murders as well.
I know, it's very paradoxical. He's bragging, but trying to blame Norris at the same time.
I was there. I saw it.
It's very similar to Douglas Clark.
Very, very. I mean, that happens with the crime partners every time. I'm dealing with that right now with Shermantine and Ing. It's the blaming of the crime partner. When they have another person there committing the murders with them, they can put all the blame on that other person. And it just happens with every single case where there's two people.
Let's just talk about the tape for a second, because the tape is just so disturbing to me. I mean, I think
I've heard 30 seconds of it, and, listening to how Anthony reacted when he was recalling it, I had that same visceral reaction. thinking back to that 30-second clip, it feels like someone is reaching down inside of you and just squeezing like your intestines. It's to hear her screams, just bone-chilling, blood-curdling screams, and you hear him hitting her, and you just hear the torture and just how badly she's just screaming, and she's being killed. And it's even
That's
30
awful.
seconds. 30 seconds, like I couldn't even go on.
And those tapes were recovered from his van?
Yeah, that was the only one recovered. The rest of them, like he took tapes of Jackie Gilliam. He told me privately he took some stuff of Andrea Hall and Cindy too. There was a lot of audio tapes. And then Christina was one of the witnesses who came forward who said she heard the 12 to 13 different girls screaming, which I've labeled the scream tape that Dina Moody said she saw under the fridge. They were buried. Bittaker buried most of the evidence because he got tipped off the cops were at Norris's place. And that's the buried evidence that has never been recovered.
Mm-hmm. He didn't tell you where they were either?
I know where it is, yeah. He
Oh,
gave
okay.
me the location.
Okay, good.
We can go search.
Okay, good. All right, we'll have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so with Anthony, you found his name in the discovery, correct?
Yeah.
Let's say. So then you reached out to him like 3 years ago before COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your reaction when he started telling you this stuff?
He was really shocked. I reached out to him and Richard Shootman, I think the same time. I found Shootman, ironically, in Donovan prison with Norris. It's just crazy how they met at CMC, and then Shootman ended up back in Donovan with Norris. So I reached out to both of them, and I sent a picture of me with Bittaker just to like show them I'm not crazy. This is real. I've been talking to Bittaker. He's been giving me the information. And they both were shocked and wrote back right away because they were like, the blonde hair, blue eyes, and they couldn't believe that Bittaker finally, after 40 years, had now given up this information, especially to me. And then shortly after, Shootman died, and Anthony, everything I was doing on the case, and he's like, I want to help you in any way I can, and he's been helping me with a lot.
Okay, good.
He really wants to see, Cindy and Andrea recovered.
And the Knott's
just like
Berry
everybody
Farm
does.
girl, I mean, that's terrible.
I know. I've looked through so many missing persons. I've tried everything to find her. I have a couple leads. There is like a girl from out of state. Her family said she went to Southern California. They believe she was working as a waitress. So I have like kind of some possibilities. It's just so hard because so many people are transplants from out of state.
Yeah.
So they could be listed missing in another state. So I'm wondering if that's why I can't find her, is she's listed missing in another state. We know she had a job and she was working right near Knott's Berry Farm. And I think the report said she was walking home from work. So she had to have lived, within a close proximity, probably, to Knott's Berry Farm.
Crazy.
The details of her murder are really horrific. They all raped her and beat her to death. Norris had sex with her afterward. And they put her body literally in a dumpster. That was never recovered.
And there was a third person.
Yes.
Now, we also know with Lynette, you had that brother and sister, correct?
Correct.
So it could have been one of them.
I don't believe it was them.
You
I
don't
think, with Lynette's situation, I don't think those kids had any idea of what was going to happen. I think Bittaker just, two birds with one stone. He was always trying to destroy innocence. He wanted to put the acid and squirt guns and give them to kids on the beach to maim each other, maim people. He just wanted to destroy innocence. And I think with those kids, he told them it was a prank, and they had absolutely no idea, like the beast they were dealing with too, him and Norris.
Well, when you said they were in San Luis Obispo, is that a Atascadero?
No, Norris was in Atascadero prior to CMC.
Okay, but they were both together in San Luis?
Yeah.
When you say this information was in the discovery, does that mean that they admitted to it, or how did it end up in the discovery about the Knott's Berry Farm?
Yeah, so about the Knott's Berry Farm, well, it's mentioned in different reports. That's all put together in the complete discovery. So the first mention is from Joe Jackson when he met with Paul Bynum, that first meeting. So that's how I learned about Knott's Berry. The first 6 pages of the discovery, it states Knott's Berry. As you go through, then the reports come from county jail, from, the investigators taking notes from there. And the Knott's Berry is talked about a lot, probably pages 20 to 100. There's mentions of Knott's Berry Farm, but there's no other follow-up reports of any investigation done on Knott's Berry.
And Joe Jackson was working with Bittaker and Norris for a period of time.
We know he was trolling with them because he was arrested in Santa Monica with Norris, prowling the neighborhood with like stockings over their head, looking for a victim to rape, so they were arrested, got right out, on bail. And I know Jackson would go with them to Redondo Pier, the Hermosa Strand, and photograph the girls. as well. And I tracked down a witness. So the woman who was working for the police department who ran that plate for Bittaker, she had 4 daughters, and Bittaker was obsessed with one of her daughters. And we know that when I talked to the girls, Bittaker and Norris had taken these girls to Knott's Berry Farm without the mother, and the girls had begged the mother. Bittaker and Norris really creeped them out, and Bittaker had touched one of the girls, and the mother still let them around her children. It's a really sick story. But the youngest girl, Elizabeth, I spoke to, she just passed away, but I had one interview with her before she did pass away, and she remembers Bittaker and Norris leaving to go to Knott's Berry Farm and meeting a third guy. And I said, Elizabeth, if I showed you a picture, would you remember who this third guy was? Because she said she only remembered him by his nickname, and his nickname was Red. And I sent her some pictures, and she said, that's him.
And who was it?
Jackson.
Jackson. Where is he now?
Oregon.
So he's not, is he in prison?
No.
So there was no follow-up on that?
No follow-up. I contacted Tom Cray, who was Paul Bynum's partner. They were the lead investigators on the Bittaker Norris case out of Hermosa Beach. So when I contacted Tom, I had told him about Knott's Berry Farm, and he was shocked. He was very shocked because he had not seen the reports from the jailhouse, and his partner Paul had never told him what Jackson told him in that first interview. Tom Cray was off that day, so Paul went alone to interview Jackson, but Paul never told Tom, for whatever reason, that Jackson said, they're going to tell you about a Knott's Berry Farm, but it's all bullshit. Tom was shocked when I told him, and I said, Tom, I'm looking over the evidence list that was collected at Norris's, and it says right in the evidence list, Knott's Berry Farm tickets were taken into evidence. I go, is there any way to find out a date on those Knott's Berry Farm tickets? Tom goes, I'm going to call Hermosa PD to see if I can get the evidence out for you. So Tom called Hermosa PD trying to get the evidence out to get me the dates on those ticket stubs of Knott's Berry Farm. But the evidence had been transferred to the sheriff's department.
So now they have it.
They have it, yeah.
And you don't have that.
And Tom couldn't get it out from the sheriff. We can try. I've been trying. Yeah.
Okay. Trying to find missing people. Just to give you a little stat here, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but just NamUs's database says there are 600,000 people declared missing every year.
Yeah.
And about 4,400 unidentified bodies discovered every year.
Yeah. And you got to remember, look at Wayne Adam Ford, his first victim, who we just found. Her family had been fighting 25 years to get her onto NamUs and listed as a missing person. And they couldn't. So you got to think about all the people who, I have no idea. You got to think about all the people who their families are trying to have them reported missing, but the police just won't. It falls under that a person can leave on their own free will type of thing, whether or not they're missing.
Got it.
So people struggle to even get, their family on there.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. And we've talked about this on our other podcast. They just need to have an agency specifically for missing people. And that's all that they do. Because there's just too many layers, too many intertwined agencies where the right hand's not talking to the left hand, and because people are adults, they can go missing, and it does, the first 48 hours they don't even do anything. There's just this onslaught of issues with this.
And there needs to be much, every time I'm talking to, I'm going into prisons and getting information from these guys, and then I go look it up on NamUs or another database, there's no information. It's here she was, possibly. Here's the date. But there's no information that I can look through, what was she wearing, what was found. It's just a couple details on the site. And when you're looking for a missing person, you need to know everything. Where were they last seen? Height, weight, everything. Their habits. Their family should be reporting on their habits, personality. This is all helpful stuff that can lead to, finding, who they could have come across. Did they hitchhike? Did they take the bus? These are important details that are never listed on these databases that we need to have.
Yeah, I guess from their standpoint, if there's no body, there's no crime. And they could turn up somewhere else. They could have just left the country. They could have changed their name. They could have. So there's a whole mess of ideas that they could explore, saying, well, it's too hard. They're having a hard enough time just solving the crimes that they have. The murders where they have a little bit of evidence, I think they just kind of don't, because we've dealt with this on our other podcasts. Yeah. There's no body. Mm-hmm. They're not going to investigate.
No.
It took us a year on the Molly and Colt podcast before we got a federal agency to at least take a look at the case and take it over from the local authorities, because there's no bodies. There's nothing there. And there probably isn't anything there.
Got to look at, Bittaker and Norris. How organized they were. And Bittaker knew those mountains. He was bringing them up there, throwing them off the cliff.
I think
and
you're
doing
right,
it
though. I think once we start digging in that area, we're going to find a
It's
lot
going to be a
more.
body farm. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting hearing from Anthony. It's interesting hearing something from someone on the inside he was a 26-year-old young man in there for a bank robbery crime. And, even him as a criminal felt like what he did was a huge violation of being a human, and that he felt compelled. And, whether or not what his motivations were, I mean, he did the right thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So, all right. You got anything else you want to say, Laura?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything. Did you guys have any follow-up questions about anything, or?
No, I think it's it's clear to me what happened, and
It's starting to all come together, right?
It's starting to come together, and the fact that Anthony was able to testify at 26 years old, like Rob said, even though he was also a criminal, a murderer, he also knew what Bittaker had done was so vile that he had to say something.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
And he wasn't the only one. The other ones that testified who I've spoken with, same thing. Bittaker is another level of criminal.
Oh, yeah.
That you never
Super.
encounter.
What was his IQ again?
139. Oh, no, 138.
138. So it's surprising that someone with that kind of IQ would have partnered up with someone. That's the thing, because when that's always the case. I mean, two people can't keep a secret.
It's true. And even Norris, his IQ was superior range. He was 120.
What's really disturbing is that Joe Jackson and Norris were all three of them arrested in Santa Monica?
No, just Norris and Jackson.
So Norris and Jackson get arrested for sneaking around trying to rape women, and then they get let out straight away, right away.
This is after Kristen and Helen reported a guy. Kristen reported, getting strangled in a parking lot. He tried to rape her. Helen reported this guy tried to get her in the car with the rings. So there were reports, and he is a listed sex offender in Redondo Beach. And after that, he's arrested in Santa Monica for prowling, let right out.
That's terrifying. And then goes on to kill all these women after that.
Yep.
I look at all the lives that could have been saved.
If they had acted on Kristen, all those lives would have been saved.
And I'm not here to bash law enforcement, because I do know that they're overextended. It's not up to them. The district attorney is in charge of these things, and it's not law enforcement's fault that they were let out. I just want to make that clear.
Right. Oh, yeah.
It was the policies. It was the policies of the time. And I feel like
even the prison psychologist said, do not let them out. But there was some policy, said we have to let them out.
And I feel like that's where we are again. That's where we are now.
Yeah.
We're in the same situation as the 70s, where these policies are saying it's okay to let these criminals back out on the street.
Well, the problem is they're kind of lumped together like criminals, where, violent criminals and sexual criminals are a different beast and should be treated, separately, looked at, really, trained forensic psychologists to deal with.
Well, yeah, that's why, in California, they have the Tuscadero State Mental Hospital, but it's really a prison.
Yeah.
It's where they house, they have mentally handicapped people with sexual violent predators in the same building.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it was one of the I've been to a lot of California state prisons around the country. That place was the scariest place in the world for me. Because you had all these guys walking around, and they're all in different colored jumpsuits, and there's lines on the ground, and they're all so heavily medicated. If they didn't have those inmates medicated on anything, that would be the scariest place in the world.
When I went to the conference where I met Alan, the Hunting for Hunters out in Pittsburgh, and another one at Yale where I met Dr. John White, anytime a Tuscadero is mentioned, it's like the room just freezes. It's like fear. Like the nation, anybody in the field of forensic psychology knows about a Tuscadero. Yeah. And no,
it's bad. I've been into some other state hospitals, but that one was like that one, and it doesn't even look scary from the outside. It kind of just looks like a high school with a fence around it.
I think you're right too, Laura. Sex offenders, it only escalates for them most of the time. So they should be treated differently than other criminals. They should be looked at more closely than other criminals, because they don't just stop.
No.
It just escalates.
And then at Tuscadero, they chemically castrate them. They do all this stuff to these sexually violent predators. And I interviewed a few of them. They said, listen, that has nothing to do with that. If they let me out tomorrow, even though I have no libido whatsoever, it's all in my brain. I'm going to go find a kid, and I'm going to do exactly what I did before.
Yeah.
So it's so part of their DNA that there's nothing you can do.
It's true. Alan even touched on that. He said, every criminal, the different motivational factors for each crime, that's what you really need to target and look at, and especially with the sex offenders.
Who said that?
Alan, you're looking at the underlying needs and motivation of the crime itself.
Yeah,
they can't be all grouped together. You have to look at the specific needs for each one.
I remember him saying that. Yeah, the needs. It was interesting how he phrased that too. The needs, because that's what it is. It's almost like an animal's needs. What's an animal's needs? They need to hunt. They need to kill. They need to eat. They need to find shelter.
Right.
For these human animals, they have to satisfy their needs, their psychological sick needs, in order for them to
people with antisocial personality or psychopathy, they run on primal emotions. So that's why you see a lot of the primal instincts come out of like the needs, eating, sex. The way they talk is all about pleasure, drug use. When you listen to their speech, it's primal. They don't have emotions higher above like we do. Like they have anger, they'll feel excitement, but it's a very low emotional scale that they'll feel, unlike us.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, thanks, Laura. This has been great.
Very interesting.
Look forward to speaking with you again. And then I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens if we look for those things that Bittaker left.
Yeah.
Well, we got to do it. All right, Laura. Next time on Partners in True Crime.
On this season of Partners in True Crime, The Serial Killer Whisperer, we will be following Laura Brand's incredible journey as she continues her groundbreaking study on serial killers.
Each week, we will release never-before-heard recordings of her conversations with the most notorious killers in hopes to get answers for the victims' families, and maybe that could lead to recovering their lost remains.
Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and check out extra content from all of our podcasts. All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content.